let's talk. But as you know, they always save the best for last. Not long ago, a young, rather short kid entered 5th grade in middle school. And while he was there, he decided to try out this new club that was being started by this school and the new social studies teacher. The teacher kept talking about an open source and software field. And while he never heard of Linux, the kid knew that he liked computers and technology. So he signed up for the club and started learning all about the things you've heard us talk about today. The kid showed up for the first meeting and he kept coming. He got to try out terminal windows, learned how to change RAM and hard drives, and install operating systems. And a lot of other things too. What he didn't know is that this new club was going to reach out to helping kids grow, change, and become leaders in their community. That kid was me. Now time for the facts. Our club started late 2019, right after the school year began. I always loved computers and I had been campaigning to get a robotics club at our school as a 3rd grader. I didn't know how complicated that was, but fast forward 2 or so years and Mr. Kraft came to our school. I had another opportunity. The computers he had were different from the ones I used before. My parents had MacBooks and my dad used a Windows computer that allowed him to tune his car. But I hadn't used much software at the time. Besides, the computers at school had all been converted to Chromebooks. This new software was Linux, specifically Ubuntu and Ubuntu. This was not my first experience with open source software. I had unknowingly been using it for many years before with a Kano computer, which is a more kid-friendly version of Raspberry Pi about this size. This was not something completely new to me, even though I didn't know it. But I now have the knowledge that I have gained over the past 3 years. Well, a lot of this is a large accomplishment. That is just the start. I'm not sure how believable this is, but with the help of Mr. Carroll, I was able to become a published author in 5th grade. And not many kids can say that. Time for the present day, 8th grade. These past years have been insane. From a brand new perspective of the tech world to a whole pandemic. And let this show you if a group of middle schoolers and a social studies teacher can do it, so can you. Using open source in school, particularly through a club like ours or an apprenticeship program like that of Andrew Dobby in Canada, opens the door for kids to step up and become leaders. Here's some of what happened to us. When we first started the Linux Club, Mr. Kraft had gotten a hold of some old desktop computers. What were they for? To give away to kids that didn't have a computer at home for homework. Our school had never given much thought of what type of device support kids at home would need. That would change big time, as you see. But Mr. Kraft thought there would be people that would need our help. And he put the kids in charge of getting those computers ready. And mind you, this was happening in the back of his social studies classroom. None of us had experience, but we all wanted to help. This led to another project, desktop computers for school. Some of our teachers wanted to have another computer for their classrooms and beyond what the school provided. As you can see, there's me under the table. We got to delivering computers to their classrooms and set them up for teachers. Conferences, this is the big one. As we learned more and more about how leaders could work at school, it made sense to go to places and tell other people about it. Mr. Kraft got us into conferences to talk, and it wasn't just him doing it. Many of us wanted to help deliver the message. As a result, we became public speakers. And during COVID, when all the conferences were going virtual instead of person, I'm sure we all remember that. Distance became meaningless to us, and the opportunities just became bigger. We ended up and delivered the keynote address at DrupalCon North America in 2021. Published articles. We spoke at DrupalCon Global in 2020. The folks at opensource.com were interested in having us submit an article for them to publish. Mr. Caraff and I took the talk I delivered at the conference and adapted it for their use. So yes, I entered 6th grade as a published author. Teaching lessons and having an open source program at school, especially one that recycles computers, opens the door for kids to experiment with both hardware and software. My friend Jake and I started taking parts from different computers and combining them to make a fun computer running at work. Fast forward a few months and I wanted to upgrade it due to the aging parts. So Jake and I went in again and completely rebuilt it with many new parts, such as a new GPU and CPU, RAM, and motherboard from a slightly newer but free computer. But when we rebuilt this, it still worked and it was still running Linux. We then taught the lessons at Penguin Corps to all of the other kids on how to do this. Other kids have helped lead our hardware and value lessons, or even offered individual assistance on OS installation for the other students. Open source works because of collaboration and experimentation. We took those concepts and applied them to open source code and used computers at school. We learned, we grew, and we became more confident. We became leaders and we made advances. I think that's a pretty good way to spend your middle school years. Thank you very much.